The warning beacon had been silent for 73 cycles. That's how long the Kelvari mining colony on Dust Ridge had been officially declared a loss abandoned, after the tunnel collapse that sealed 200 souls beneath kilometers of stone and regret. Juna Merrill wasn't supposed to be there. The transport captain had refused to land. "There's nothing alive down there," he'd said, his four eyes blinking in that slow, pitying way the Zenthari did when they thought humans were being irrational. The structural scans show complete collapse. Even if something survived the initial cave-in, the air would be toxic by now. Juna had jumped anyway. The emergency chute deployed 300 meters above the surface, and she'd landed hard in the red dust that gave the ridge its name. The ship had left without her. Now, standing at the mouth of Shaft 7, the only entrance the satellites suggested might still have partial integrity, she checked her rebreather one last time. The fabric of her jumpsuit was already coated in the fine crimson powder that swirled endlessly across this desolate moon. The distress signal had been faint, so faint that it hadn't even registered on official channels. But Juna had learned to listen to the frequencies others ignored. 3 years as a salvage runner in the outer fragments had taught her that silence often screamed the loudest. She descended. The tunnel swallowed light like a hungry thing. Her headlamp cut through absolute darkness. Illuminating support beams twisted into impossible angles. The air was thick, not toxic yet, but getting there. Her suit's sensors painted the atmosphere in shades of amber warning. 40 meters down, she found the first body. A Kelvari miner, crystalline carapace cracked and dulled. She whispered the traditional words anyway. Humans always did that, even for species who didn't share their death customs. The other species found it strange. Juna found it necessary. At 70 meters, the tunnel branched. Left showed complete collapse. Right showed something. A gap. A pocket of space where geometry had favored survival over destruction. She squeezed through. The chamber beyond was small, no larger than a cargo pod. Emergency glow sticks, long dead, littered the floor. And in the corner, pressed against stone, were 3 small shapes. Kelvari cubs. The eldest, barely old enough to have developed his crest ridges, clutched his 2 younger siblings with 4 trembling arms. Their crystalline bodies were covered in dust so thick they looked like statues carved from clay rather than living beings. Their large eyes reflected Juna's headlamp with the dull sheen of resignation. They didn't run. They didn't even chirp. They simply stared. "Hey," Juna said softly, kneeling. The universal translator in her collar clicked on. "My name is Juna Merrill. I'm here to take you home." The eldest cub, she would later learn his name was Rocky, made a sound like grinding crystal. A warning. A plea. A question all at once. "I know," Juna replied. "I know you don't know me. I know humans look strange to you. But I need you to trust me." She ran the calculations quickly. 3 cubs. Her oxygen was already at 60%. The climb back would be brutal. The Kelvari breathed a helium-nitrogen mix. Her rebreather could adapt, but not for 4. She'd have to share her air supply, which meant Rocky moved first. Not toward her, but shifting to place himself between Juna and his siblings. Protective instinct overriding terror. He couldn't have been more than 8 cycles old, barely equivalent to a human child of 6. "You're brave," Juna said. "Your parents would be proud." At the word parents, Rocky's crystalline surface rippled with bioluminescent grief, the Kelvari equivalent of tears. The 2 smaller cubs behind him began to sob, their bodies producing that distinctive grinding glass sound that made Juna's chest ache. She made her decision. "We're all getting out of here," she said. "All of us. Together." She reconfigured her rebreather to cycle at maximum efficiency, accepting the risk of nitrogen narcosis. She gathered the 2 smallest cubs. They weighed almost nothing, their bodies hollowed by hunger, and cradled them against her chest. Rocky she guided to climb onto her back, his 4 small arms wrapping around her neck. "Hold tight," she told him. "Whatever happens, don't let go." The climb was agony. Every 10 meters, she had to stop, share her air supply through the emergency coupling with Rocky, then continue. Her muscles screamed. The cubs trembled against her, dust falling from their bodies in cascades as they moved. The smaller ones sobbed continuously, the sound vibrating through Juna's bones. At 40 meters, her oxygen hit 20%. Warning klaxons screamed in her helmet. The tunnel seemed to stretch infinitely upward. At 20 meters, her vision began to blur. The nitrogen narcosis was setting in. She could feel Rocky's arms loosening around her neck. "Stay with me," she gasped. "We're almost there." Almost. At 10 meters, she saw sunlight. At 5 meters, her legs gave out. She fell forward, catching herself on torn hands, refusing to drop the cubs. Rocky's grip tightened again, finding strength she didn't know he had. They crawled the last 5 meters together. When they emerged into the red dust and thin atmosphere of Dust Ridge, Juna collapsed. The cubs tumbled from her, crying out but alive. So impossibly alive. Rocky was the first to recover. He crawled to Juna's faceplate, his small hands pressing against the transparent material. His eyes were wide, luminescent with emotion. His species had no name for. The rescue ship arrived 6 hours later. They found a human woman lying in red dust, unconscious but breathing, and 3 Kelvari cubs covered in dust, and the dried tracks of their tears curled around her in a protective circle, refusing to leave. The medics would later say it was impossible. The oxygen calculations didn't work. The physical endurance required exceeded human norms. The risk was insane, but that was the thing about humans. Rocky would tell his own cubs decades later, his voice carrying the weight of memory and wonder. They didn't calculate whether something was possible. They simply decided it was necessary. And then they did it anyway.